Om Pramadina Nasandeha Kim Karishyami Vrittiman Utpadyante Biliante Buddhascha Yata Jale. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Ignorance is unreal. So how can it cause you any real doubt? Therefore, what do the luminaries do with their mind and its thoughts? They allow them to rise spontaneously, then dissolve them back at the end of the day, like bubbles into water. Om peace, peace, peace. Om na asat vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate sataha. Ubiyor api drishintos tuanayos tattva darshinabihi. Om shantihi, shantihi, shantihi. The unreal never is. The real never ceases to be. The truth about both has been realized by the seers. Om peace, peace, peace. May Brahman protect us and may Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Today we enter into the third class of our three-part series entitled Naham, Kaham, and Saham. So we try to do one class on each of them, which of course is a marvelous feat if you can do it. And we gave out the Naham teachings. The basic point of that was that everything that I'm not, like 24 cosmic principles and other more unsavory things like 6 passions, 8 fetters, avidya, asmita, ragadvesha, abhibinesha, the 5 kleshas, which are a marvelous system for checking the mind and seeing where it is. All under the heading of Naham, what I am not and what I need to renounce. Get thee behind me style. Then we went last Sunday to the Kaham part of it, and I want to finish that up today, just the tail end of it, a tag of it, because we found out that the question, who am I, also has compartments to it and levels. You can't just ask the question and walk away and get no answer. So I would say that who am I has some penultimate answers to it before the ultimate answer comes, that I am that, or that thou art. Or as we say at the puja, we were saying, Pragyanam Brahman Tattvamasi, I am Atma Brahma, and Aham Brahmasmi. Those are the great 4 Mahavakyas, declarations of divine prominence, divine presence. So that all comes as an ultimate answer to this problem of, or this query of Atma Vichara called Kaham. So the great Atma Vichara teaching in Advaita Vedanta that is followed by neti practice leading to iti, and has to be examined thoroughly in all its parts. Sometimes beings will take years to look into this. Monks sannyasins, brahmacharis, and just study this plus a few other of the great Advaitic axioms and meditate on it forever until all of these dawn on the mind fully. And one gets into that higher state of consciousness almost naturally. And then as I was chanting and out of the Avadhuta Gita, that the thoughts just arise naturally and spontaneously and then fall and rise and fall, much in which way later the Buddhists described it. And they get dissolved back into the mind like bubbles into water, but if they rise in the daytime for an ordinary person, and then they cling to the mind at night, and when they fall asleep, they fester. They fester there. You're dreaming about things you experienced in the daytime that you should have gotten over and gotten behind thee, and then these things began to become a part of those samskaras and those desire-based problems that are festering in the mind of ordinary people. Next week, I think I'll give a class, the first of a 3-part series called Obsessed Mind, Ordinary Mind, and Original Mind. So stay tuned for that over the next 3 Sundays. And we'll look at those 3 levels of thinking, or non-thinking, or poor thinking. So non-thinking is actually a pretty good thing in Vedanta, that you can quell the thoughts and again, dissolve them back in, especially those ones that aren't beneficial to you. You can entertain Dharma and Atmagyan better that way, because then all of the surface thoughts are out of the way, and you can look deep, as Vivekananda said, when the ocean sinks, then you can see all the coral and pearls on the bottom. When it rises again, then it covers all that, veils all that. So it's often when you go towards this neti-neti, or not this, or Naham kind of level of thinking, that you begin to see these bed of coral and pearls on the bottom of your mind, like as in dive deep, O mind, dive deep into the ocean of God's beauty. If you descend to the uttermost depths, then you will find the gem of love. So that was a beautiful song that Sri Ramakrishna loved when they sang it to him in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. That's the idea here, is that when everything is come flooding out of the mind and has covered that singular non-dual reality that sometimes they call shunyata, or emptiness, then people are happy and content. They also become unhappy and malcontent at times. So that you notice that variation in the ordinary and obsessed mind. But then when original mind takes over, that's when all of these concerns have been gotten out of the way, and one is looking at the truth and the truth alone. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If you go to the court of God after you're through with this world, and the Lord in his beneficent form will have put your hand on the Gita, or maybe on the Quran, or yes, on the Bible too. And then you'll have to swear an oath that's based on another kind of hierarchy, a much grand, sovereign kind of realization. And then you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's really a good moniker for Vedanta, particularly for Advaita Vedanta. So it's good to talk about this today because we are in the presence of Mahalakshmi today. We know our Sri Sharda Devi, how beautiful the song puts it. Parama Pavana Hridaya Kali Yuga Dasite Bhakti Yin Dayadi Penu Nina Nama Sri Sharda Devi He Mahamate Sri Ramakrishna Gurudeva Samprite. So basically she was the incarnation of Lakshmi and the incarnation of Parvati, and the incarnation of Saraswati, and Kali Yuga, the Sita. She's both Sita and Kali to this age. So that's the holy day today that we sing. Even great Advaitas will talk about that. Geyam Gitam Mashashra Hashram Jayam Sri Pati Rupam Ajasram Jayam Sajana Sange Chitam Jayam Dina Jaya Chavitam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Mudhamate Samprapte Sanihite Kale Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukrin Karane. As is sung by Shankara and his disciples. Read the Gita. Gayam Gitam Nama Sahasram is the Sanskrit. Read the Gitam, recite the Sahasranam. That's 1,000 names of Lakshmi. Meditate daily on the form of the Lord of Lakshmi. Lead the mind always towards holy company, and distribute your wealth constantly among the poor and for good causes. As Mahalakshmi will fulfill everything at that point. And why do you do that? Jai Mai Chantraika Vishnu Vyartam Kupayasi Maya Sahishnu Sarvasinapi Pasha Atmanam Sarva Trocha Shrija Veda Gyanam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Mudhamate Samprapte Sanihite Kale Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukarin Karane Bhaja Govindam. So why should we meditate on the Lord of Lakshmi? Because in you and in me, and everywhere as well, there is but one God. So do not get angry or become impatient. Perceive the self in all beings, and leave off of ignorance, which is the cause of all difference. So when we're sitting on this holy day of Mahalakshmi Puja, we remember these great Advaitas. They don't have any problem singing about God with form or about the goddess. They'll jump right in and give you dozens and dozens of verses that ring with the truth and wisdom of non-dual reality, combined with Shakti power. So that's how Sharma Krishna put it. Brahman and Shakti are one and the same, like fire and its heat. So you'll find them combining in all the great stotrams and all the great slokas, sutras, and the bhajans that we sing, the Sahasranam, the great 1,000 verse names of the Lord and of the Mother. And in that way, then we can propitiate her and invoke her here today as we look into Saham. So Naham and Kaham have gone by, hopefully gone by just in the sense of we have seen them and seen deeper into them because of that falling and shrinking of the waters of the plenitude of everything. And then all of a sudden you see everything stripped bare, and you can see this beautiful vision of yourself and of the Divine Mother, and know your oneness with her. Then everything comes dancing back. So some souls like Bhartrihari say, oh Mahalakshmi, please give all that wealth to everyone else. Don't send it my way, because I may become deluded by it. I don't want to forget your vision. See? So it's because I've found that only renunciation is fearless. So in that way, when we talk about Saham, we're talking about something that's in the power of Shakti to give us, but goes beyond the power of what Shakti expresses and manifests in the worlds of name and form, time and space. It goes even beyond the Trinity. It's called moksha, mukti, absolute reality, realization, enlightenment, nirbijam, asampragyata, nirvikalpa, nirvana. I can go on thinking of different traditions and talk about this singular state of non-dual awareness that Saham represents. But as we bridge ourselves into that, let's take a look at the end of Kaham, sort of like a tag, as I said, that picks us up from last week and takes us into the teachings of the Dharma, which are so effective in ridding ourselves of this ignorance that Shankara just talked about. Distribute your wealth among the poor, meditate daily upon her, lead the mind always to holy company, because that will destroy this ignorance, which is the cause of all difference between beings and races and cultures and nations and worlds. Even the outer world and the inner world, always so divorced from each other as if they have no connection. So we want to make sure that that root ignorance, mula vidya, is removed from the mind. So this chart on my right is the tag end of what I wanted to talk about. Because when you accomplish Naham and you get to Kaham, you'll find out, as we talked about last week, that there are some requisites still to be gleaned and accomplished. And that's, for most beings, we mentioned renunciates like Bhartrihari, he's on an entirely different level, but he had his experiences of the world. He wrote 100 verses on the world, and then 100 verses on romance, and then 100 verses on renunciation. In one lifetime, he wrote these. So the seers like him very much because it shows how he involved through all of this Naham to get to this goal of Saham. But you can talk about those souls and number them on one hand, rare as hen's teeth, as sometimes the expression went. But then you talk about most souls, then you're talking about souls that need to approach this truth. That is, they see that it's true, but, and I've quite often heard it myself, I'm really not ready to embrace that, to commit myself to it fully. So I think I'll float a bit and maybe test things a little bit. But one great saying I heard recently is you got married, right? So you got through with dating. So if you get married, why are you still dating? You see? So that's the case with people who take initiation and commit to a path, and then they start casting about. You see, they found what they were looking for. They should have stayed there and dived deeper mind into the ocean of God's beauty to find that vision of the Divine Mother and the Lord of the universe, which will then take them like the son or the daughter to the Father, and they will have that realization. They'll dig one deep well, and they'll get fully satisfied in that. And then these waves of Maya will not come dancing back. And as Kamalakanta sings, you'll just rise and fall on the breast of reality as it swells with plenitude, and then it decreases with emptiness, swells again, decreases back and forth. And you're just in your sailboat with one foot dangling in the water and a hat on, compass on, automatic pilot, and you're just sailing across the ocean of relativity. Beautiful song about that. So this chart makes it easy for people, and it is a chart for monastics. I mean, teachings for monastics. It's found in the Jivan Mukti Viveka. So I took it out because it was one of the teachings that was more explicable about this problem of renunciation for a householder. Or we talked about it recently for a vanaprasthan, person who's living on the fringes of society and is done with basically money matters and raising a family and so forth. Now they have more time. The advantage of the brahmachari and the monk is that at very young age they'll come and they'll get all this time to put their minds on Brahman alone, thoughts on Brahman alone. We'll get to that in a minute. It's called those who are fitted for the Brahman state. And that will take us more into the Saham atmosphere. But in the meantime, these 4 stages of renunciation for people who are approaching that goal, trying to qualify themselves for it, and trying to increase their capacity to know Brahman, as the great peace chants, may our mind increase in its capacity to know Brahman, are very useful. So you can see here with the quote from the Jivan Mukti Viveka, renounce first the desire for enjoyment, then the inner mental desires that foster it. Keep the pure desires, such as the desire for friendship. Then practice giving even that up inwardly and seek knowledge alone. Finally, giving up even the desire for knowledge. Abide in what remains and give up that by which you renounce. And renounce renunciation, renounce the poison of renunciation, renounce the poison of non-renunciation. That's also in the Ashtavakra Samhita. So that kind of idea means that you're always clinging to something as you move back inside. So you have to make sure that you let go of all these levels as you enter toward that non-dual state. In one song, it's sung that let's go into the heart, O mind, and worship the mother in secret there. Wait, what are you doing? You can't bring the eyes in. You can't bring the ears in. You can't bring the hands and body in. You have to come only yourself. Oh, well, actually, you can bring the tongue, because when you see her, you'll want to sing her glories. So a beautiful song expresses this going inside, leaving the senses outside as they were. You can always go back to them later, don't worry. But it gets to the point of this. Renounce first the desire for enjoyment. That the mountain of enjoyment's in the way, you're never going to see that which is beyond enjoyment and enjoying and enjoyer. So that would be the first thing that you would get taught if you were setting your foot on this straight and narrow path and this razor's edge path to enlightenment. And I think it would be the same, according to Sri Ramakrishna, whether you're a monk or householder, that renunciation has to be done. So this is almost yogic, if you can see desire for enjoyment, then the inner desires that foster it. Isn't it much like the sampragata levels of samadhi? First, savichara, nirvichara, sarvitarka, nirvichara. You're going from objects in yoga, Patanjali says, and then you're moving to the sources of those objects, and you see their connection. And then you give those up, and you get back into the state of sasmita and sananda, where you can see both of them and see the source of both of them. Back in the ego, that's where you see, well, I'm getting all my bliss from inside, not from outside. These things outside of me aren't going to fulfill me. So that's exactly why you have to let them go. And it could be an experiment on your part to do this for a while. In the West, with this particular age and this particular nations, a group of nations we're talking about that have fortunately got a little bit of word of the Vedanta, and other Indian darshanas like Buddhism and yoga. It's very good that they can take their time and slowly get into the water. So Holy Mother said sometimes you get pushed in, but you can get in slowly. Just get your toe wet, then your shin wet, then finally, like people go swimming here in Hawaii, the water's so warm, but they still wade up to their waist and they don't want to get their head wet. So somebody will come along behind them and just push them into the wave. So you have to get that immersion, that full immersion, to really be a part of the ocean, because you're always holding back. That last vestige of holding back is happening all the time. So that's what you do in a very simple fourfold direction here. So I put it even more succinctly in the Sanskrit here. First, you have what's Vishva Vasana. Vishaya Vasana. Well, Vishaya, of course, is the senses. So give up base desires from the sense objects. And again, if you're taking a lifelong commitment as a monk, then this is going to have to be something that you spend some time on. Get down to the very roots of it, extirpate it, completely. It's like a root canal in a tooth, you know. Just take the tooth out, leave the nerve in there. It's going to be aching later. See, so you get dentist has to drill all the way down, get rid of the whole root, take it out, so there'll be no aching later. So in that way, you have to get down to the very last past lifetimes level of your desires, where they're persisting in you, and the residues of them that cause your thinking to somehow think that objects can satisfy you when they can't. So there's certain truths you have to accept along the way. And so this is coming in train with Kaham. You know, who am I? Well, I might have looked back and said, I'm not the 24 cosmic principles and all that. But when I said that, and then I came forth and I said Kaham, and I said, who am I? There were still some things there that were up for grabs. You see, they were trying to compete with the I. They're still putting themselves forward kind of in an odious way, saying, no, you know, I'm the one you need to look at. No, I'm the one. So these things are slowly being gotten rid of as you practice the who am I phase of Atma Vichara. So you can see there, Vishaya Vasana. Vasana means desire, Vishaya means senses, so they're pretty explicit about that. And I'm telling you that although this is Advaita Vedanta teaching, it's really very much like the early yoga sutras of Patanjali and how they go about it through the 4 kinds of seated samadhis, they're called. Then number 2 is called manasa vasana. So give up the internal desires of the mind. So you're tracing the outer to the inner. Find out that, you know, I tried to give them up out there, but they still got at me in my mind. So many people, if they're trying to renounce, but they're not ready to renounce, have this problem. Well, I gave up food but back in my day it was, I fasted. No, but it didn't actually do anything for them their whole life. Maybe help them live without food a little bit. Maybe they'll realize man does not live by bread alone. But on the other hand, spiritually, it didn't benefit them. So these things only benefit you when you come to know that they're connected to the mind's desires. And if you got rid of them in the mind, then you wouldn't have the desire for them out here. That's how some souls arrive on earth. Others are looking and saying, I can do that renunciation, and they'll try it with the outer object, but it won't work because the desire is still in their mind. So this is also Veda and Vedanta and yoga is following much the same track. This is how Vedanta is the truth and yoga is the practice. The third is pranaya vasana. Give up social relations and cultivate knowledge alone. I heard someone say just the other day that I had to give up all my friends when I walked on this path because they were all doing things I didn't want to do. They were hooking up, they were partying, they were imbibing intoxicants. I didn't want any of that, so I had to walk away. And so this is kind of toward that idea, social relations. If you try and hold those at the same time you hold the path to renunciation or freedom, it's going to be rather difficult, if not impossible. So it's back within enjoyment, right? You can't try and realize God if you still have desire for enjoyments. So even the gurus will tell you that. Fill yourself in the world first. Try and do it dharmically, please, so we don't have to come rescue you later out of a bunch of problems and suffering that you've caused yourself and others. But go ahead and fulfill yourself in the world with the Dharma legitimately. The Holy Mother gave that teaching too. So this is following in that line, but it's just a very 4-step, simple practice that if you can do it, if you have the strength, boldness, courage to do it, that you can arrive at a high pinnacle very early on. It's not that hard to give up social relations when you take a look at it from the witness position and see what foolishness it is, what silliness is going on out there, and what damage is being done to people, personalities, environment, nature, and human beings, and you become sensitive to that. So it's an easy step to make, really. And you withdraw like a forest dweller, vanaprasthan, or like the monk has done, or like the householder who doesn't want to participate in the ills of that kind of activity anymore. Like military and war and things that we all were protesting back in the 60s. We didn't want to be a part of that. But we couldn't get across to them, that this was not just a moral dilemma or an ethical problem, but it's that this is the way that you naturally act in yoga and in Vedanta and in Buddhism and in Jainism and in Sufism and that there are people who withdraw from the world almost without even having to say, I renounce it. That this is a very direct path, and when it gets to Vidyavasana, that's actually much more difficult to the lover of divine reality than giving up mere pleasures in society. When you have to give up knowledge, that hurts. I can tell you. So give up knowledge to realize truth. So remember what Krishna said in the Gita, a very pregnant sloka. It said that knowledge becomes a danger, if it doesn't lead to truth. He tells Arjuna this on the battlefield. So Arjuna is also thinking about this knowledge. He's got a lot of knowledge of the Vedanga, but he doesn't have knowledge of the Vedanta yet. So he knows arts and sciences and archery and various things, chariots and aparavidya stuff, but that's all Vedanga. He probably has learned astrology and and other sciences in the 6 limbs of Vedanga, but hasn't been given these great teachings of the Dharma except by example. So Krishna is now coming and telling him, there'll come a time when you'll need to not hang on to this knowledge. The ego cannot hang on to this knowledge. It becomes stale and binding. My knowledge, and I'll go only so far with it, and then it'll weigh me down. But if that knowledge is used to realize truth, well, it's said very nicely up here, that we'll get to it. The object of work is purification of the soul to make it fit for knowledge. So I'm jumping ahead there because it fits. Let's read the final quotes at the bottom, because this has just been a 4-step tag to this Kaham part of the teaching. And you can, it's like, you can do it kind of saying, you too can become a renunciate. It's not that hard. You might have to experiment with it for a while, see how insipid enjoyments are, how they always bring pain as well as pleasure, then see how social relations are not fulfilling you, whether that takes you a few dates before you make the commitment, or whether it takes you years and years to get over your desire for being a part of society. Maybe you just come to help society from an objective viewpoint. That's still karma yoga, you see. That's still going along well. But you do the best help to society by being a witness of it and not being a part of its problems. Otherwise, you can become a part of the problem, as they say, and not the solution. Here's what Lord Vasishtha says about this teaching. The beginner should fill 2 parts of the mind with objects of enjoyment, 1 part of study of scripture, and 1 part of attending on the Guru. Of course, this is out of Yoga Vasishtha. So this is one way in which he tells his student, who is the great young avatar, unbeknownst to anyone yet, except him and 9 other rishis, or 11 other rishis knew that he was an avatar on earth. And this is how he told Sri Ram about how to slowly, gradually get into this state of renunciation, which we're talking about up here. So there are dynamics to it again. Give just 2 parts of your mind to enjoyment. That means if you have 4 parts of your mind on enjoyment as the goal of life, that's the step you have to make. I'm going to give up half of my enjoyments and see what happens to me. And then where I can't give something up, I can't pull something up by the roots and expect it to feel good, because there's an emptiness where the roots were. See, so now I'm going to have to fill those empty spots with something. So you fill it with study of scripture and attending upon the Guru, and you're fine. In fact, you're better. And then finally, one part on attending the Guru, but that's for the beginner. So you can see that both Jivan Mukta Viveka and Lord Vashishta, at two different times, we're talking about this gradual stage of attaining renunciation, so you can get from Kaham to Saham. The intermediate student should fill one part of the mind with objects, one part by reflecting on the scriptures, and two parts by attending on the Guru. So now you see, you're taking those four parts of the mind and you're shifting them willingly to increase more scriptural study and more of the attendance upon the luminaries, the holy beings. So it's very gradual, so therefore it's not that painful for people. Giving up by degrees, it's called. Holy Mother also talked about that. The advanced student should fill half the mind with study of scriptures, and then the remaining half with worship of the teachers. So this is how, in the same way, but much earlier, Lord Vashishta is talking about this. He's putting it really in 3 steps, how to turn yourself into a grand renunciate and still live in the world and help beings. The way I put it here below, calling on one of the great teachings, is raising an opposite wave in the mind called pratipaksha bhavanam is a much overlooked and underestimated method of spiritual practice. It is a simple way of watering the flowers and not the weeds. Here the aspirant does not strive to root out desires, to squelch emotions, or to destroy passions, or to force austerities. Instead, he slowly transforms the mind by fixing it on the Dharma and its teachings alone. So, another way that you could swiftly come to this grand renunciate atmosphere is just by taking the whole of the mind and putting it on spirituality. If you can't put it all on Brahman, because Brahman's very difficult to meditate on yet, then you could put it on just listening to the words of your teacher and reading the scriptures, and that will naturally be a thinner. So in this complex mind, and the mind is painted with so many different colors. So you have a thinner that you just put that in there, and that great teaching of Dharma, or as it turns from knowledge towards truth, as we were talking about here, it begins to look more like Dharma turning into Swadharma, or Swadharma turning into Atma Gyan. And that's Atma Gyan, is the knowledge of the Supreme Self. And there can be nothing more. That's not thinner anymore, that's acid. You put that in the mind, it burns away everything. So you're going to have to be ready for this rise of consciousness, that great tidal wave that's coming. We talked about Saturday on that satsang. Have you seen this great tidal wave that's mounting? And Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Swamiji and all the disciples, this great wave that's mounting, and it's just going to sweep over relativity. It's going to overflow the banks of ordinary consciousness and flood everything. Can't you hear the sound of that coming? So they're talking about it in a song, a very beautiful song, and brings about great realizations like that, from Dharma to Swadharma, and then you're living your path, and then Atma Gyan just begins to come forth out of your own original mind. So that's why next week, when I was thinking about this today, I thought, well, I'll give a series of classes now called Attached Mind, or Obsessed Mind, so that everything starts with O. Obsessed Mind, Ordinary Mind, and Original Mind. Good, so let's go over here and get officially into Saham. And look what happens to a soul who has made the grade, has hit the mark. If you think that that's just oneness and you're willing to leave it at a simple description like that, fine if you can meditate on true oneness and just absorb yourself in it. But great beings have found that there are also strata in higher consciousness. It's just like digging into the earth. You'll find different strata. Some of it toward the surface is younger earth and younger matter, and then it gets older and more ancient. Finally, you dig deep and you find the most ancient ground. Well, that ground of existence is going to take some digging as well at the level of realized Kaham. That is, who am I? The answer comes back to you. Well, my teacher tells me that I'm Brahman. See, the seers say that I'm Brahman. Can I now admit to that? Can I say I'm Atma Brahma in all good faith with assurance and not have anything kick back on me? See, later on, am I ready for that kind of steadiness that Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, the sthiti pragnasya? Can I stand in the way of that great wave coming and maintain my balance? As Maya recedes and consciousness comes on, now I have a different problem. Before I was trying to do away with Maya, and I'm trying to absorb Brahman, you see. So it's a problem of very different nature, but nonetheless it's still a great feat to realize Brahman. So they talk about it in this way, and Vivekananda says is our guide here for this particular 7 levels of higher knowledge. He says the earth moves, causing the illusion of the movement of the sun, but the sun does not move. So Prakriti, or Maya, or nature, is moving, changing, unfolding veil after veil, turning over leaf after leaf of this grand book called life, while the witnessing soul drinks in knowledge unmoved and unchanged. It was one of his favorite analogies, was that you pick up the book of nature. That's when the soul takes a body and comes into relativity. It came from an unformed, pure place where it was homogeneous. Everything was just homogeneous. There was no difference, no separation. It comes here in this world of separations. So the observing soul who comes here knowing about the formlessness of reality, all of a sudden encounters form in the worlds of name and form. And Vivekananda said that's like picking up the book of nature, because the soul is not nature. And it wrote that book besides. And now it has to get used to the fact that it's come back to what it wrote. And some people who come back to what has been written by the great mind, they don't recognize anything. It's like a student in school or college who forgot everything that he learned in grade school when he went to his first year of high school. Well, I don't recall any of it, because he didn't study. So the soul's sort of like that. And when it comes out of a great formless state, it has to sort of relearn everything. Like the story of Vivekananda locking himself in a library of a Western student one day and just reading all the encyclopedias over several days. They asked him, he said, yeah, I read them all. And I have sort of this ability to speed read things and retain, he said. I can retain everything I read. And basically the idea was that he had to recall everything that happened over the last 1,000 or 2,000 years since he was here last. So he wanted to catch up on basically all the good and bad that we got ourselves into, all the progress and all the mischief that we got ourselves into as a human race in the Bur Loka. And so he recalled all of that by looking at all the things that came out. So it's rather like that. So he likes it that the soul just picks up the book of nature and it turns everything page by page. It reads to the last page, closes the book, puts it down, but it never changed at all. It never moved. It was nature that did all the moving. A very beautiful example of how Saham is in the mind of a great realized soul. They're not taking the unreal to be real, as I chanted at the beginning of this class. Na asat vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate sataha. The unreal never is, so I definitely shouldn't study it as if it were real. which I think is what a lot of the Western savants are doing now, godless society and so forth, without any anchor or any deep connection to Dharma, illumined souls, and true religion. Without any connection to those things, then they're coming up with everything out of matter, out of everything that's already written in that book of matter. And if it weren't bad enough that you went and didn't realize that you had written it yourself, then you try and take credit for it. You see, so he goes in both of those movements. But the egoless soul is standing back and watching that, like Krishna in the Gita says, everything happens in nature, Arjuna. It doesn't happen in you. So who's the you he's talking about? Well, that's Kaham, isn't it? Who am I? Who are you, Arjuna? If you're not this changing battlefield out here, you must be the Atman, pure, timeless, deathless, changeless. So stages of that, so it impresses it upon our head, and I've got a quote from Swamiji, a short one for each one of these. Antaha Gyan comes first, that's inner knowledge. Realization of inherent knowledge. I just, last 5 minutes, just talked about that. I don't need to comment any more on it. It's all your own inner knowledge. And the object in work is purification of the soul to make it fit for that knowledge. So there's something about coming to this world then with the body, mind mechanism is that you have to get the tamas and rajas worked out, the gunas worked out of the occasion by doing selfless works. If they're selfish works, it increases the gunas. If it's selfless works, it's fine. Dukkha samyoga viyogam. Nice Sanskrit phrases roll off the tongue. This is actually a stage, a level of higher knowledge is that they learn how to eliminate pain. It is glorious to withhold the soul from suffering with the body. I was reading some dialectic back and forth between people recently, and they were all talking and arguing about the fact that how important the body is, that the body is the most important thing. And I was totally in disagreement with them. And so some of these people were aware that Eastern traditions deny the body. Some maybe too starkly, too prematurely, but nevertheless they're saying no way you can take the body out of the quotients. It's so important. So the whole accent was upon that. But once the body has been utilized and seen for what it is, in terms of birth, growth, decays, old age, decay, and death, the 6 transformations, the 6 fetters, the 6 passions, the 8 fetters, the 5 kleshas, the 9 antarayas, all these systems that they haven't read, obviously, are telling you about the downfall of the body, either now or later. And at the same time, they're telling you about the permanence of the original mind, permanence of the soul with a capital S. He's using soul here with a small s. So it is glorious to withhold the soul from suffering with the body. What about that noble turn? If you could, as he did, just Sri Krishna told you, Naren just walks around like his eyes open, just seeing God in everything, or not seeing out here, seeing God inside as he looks outside, seeing God inside. So that's noble. You don't see many souls like that, and when you do, you feel attracted to them. Because why? Because you're in pain and they're not. So these people who come and argue with you about this, they're still in pain. A pain of a debate is still there. But Gaudapada's not getting into that debate with you. He's got the truth. He doesn't have to enter in there and get caught back in what? Society, right? He doesn't have to do that. So it's only you that are suffering pain, and that's your problem, and you should probably listen to these great souls. Therefore, they will tell you that pain has become eliminated for them. Yes, pain does act as a better healer than pleasure does. So it has a place in things. But it's more noble to withhold the body from pain. That is, hold it in joy, hold it in peace, hold it in bliss, hold it in enlightenment. That's called Jivan Mukti. Samadhi Sampadanam, attainment of samadhi. Remain immersed in samadhi, but come out in order to help others. This might as well be just a great moniker for the Ramakrishna order entirely, overall. Atmano mokshartam hita ditaya cha. See, is that saying that Swamiji came for realization of the self and the good of the world. But he didn't say for the good of the world and then the realization of the self. First you get free, and then without mistakes, so many mistakes anyway, you go and you try and help others. Because once he made the comment that a realized soul makes 1,000 mistakes, then an ignorant soul makes hundreds of thousands. So you get into this mind, this collective mind, and you can see that there's going to be a lot of sacrifice to be had, to be made, offerings to be made, and some great tools to be learned. So this is how you become renounced of the whole process first, and then you get into it. It's not popular, but it's the best of all ways to proceed. So many people are doing it in the other direction. Seeing it, taking it to be real, thinking they can help it. These are 3 great mistakes right away. You're not seeing it. You're seeing Brahman, number 1. You think you help it, it can't. It's the way it is. And then you find out, you're just helping the self in all when you help yourself. When you realize yourself, you're helping others. But if you work without realizing yourself, you're actually harming them. And these are the laws of karma yoga stated by Sri Krishna in the Gita, by Ram in the Ramayana. You can go to these great souls and find this to be true. So try and immerse yourself in samadhi. He didn't say what level, thankfully, because I don't think in Nirvikalpa samadhi you can probably any help to anyone except on the highest level. They're opening a door to light when you're in that samadhi, and hopefully they have enough power to get to you. But remaining immersed in samadhi means in Savikalpa samadhi, where you're in a good state of mind and people can come to you and rely upon you to help them out of darkness. Go thou from place to place and help them out of darkness, Maya's chains. Without the search for pleasure or the fear of pain, go beyond them both. Sannyasam bold, say Om Tat Sat. Om is how he wrote that. Samadhi Sampadanam then has been talked about. Now, Samyak Darshana, it sounds very much like one of the Eightfold Path of Lord Buddha. Perfect vision. All the little thought whirlpools into which the mind has broken declare one single aim, a vision of a search after the unity of being. So think about that in case of your own mind, all the little thought whirlpools. He was thinking in those terms a lot. And therefore, one aim is in all that various mental experimentation. See, one aim is there, is the unity of all things. Where's the pool in its entirety without waves? Where's the non-vibrational? Where's Om, out of which all vibrations came, but which itself remains completely unstruck? I'll show you a little bit about that today if we have time. Nitya Mukti, absolute freedom. So you can see stages of higher knowledge, very beautiful. This is what happens to Saham, to a person who got Saham. It doesn't happen to a person who asks, who am I, and doesn't do anything about it, doesn't ever get the answer, or waits around a long time to get an answer, when the answer is all coming from inside itself. And that self hasn't been seen or realized yet. So you then put more of your mind, you see, more of your mind on those beings who have realized it. See how important Vishisha says, put your mind more and more into those great rishis and holy company, get closer and closer to them. A story about my teacher and an elderly man who came to him, who was around him a lot, was very shy of Swami. And then one day Swami knew that, and he turned to him, sitting a little, and said, if you want to get warm, you have to come close to the fire. And then Swami just turned away, and that's all he said. So this elderly man realized that he was talking about the shyness was a problem in the way that he had to get closer to the truth that was being expressed by Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj. Peace and bliss be upon him. So he did, and over time then, he wrote a book on Swami Sheshanandaji and when he was there in his last days, and came out quite nicely, his time with Swami Sheshananda. This is a beautiful one. So Nitya Mukti, absolute freedom, means freedom is the condition of growth. Take that off, the result is degeneration. Everything begins to fall apart. And that's Maya. And that's all the sufferings and ignorance, attachment, aversion, egotism, clinging to life, fear of death. All those things start to come along when they weren't necessary. They were also in potential in that same mind out of which all good things came. You watered the seeds instead of the flowers. Quit doing that. Stop that. See, slap your own hand if you, or you know, go to Swami Sheshananda and get closer to him. He'll slap your hand, as he used to do to us. Follow the tradition, he would say. You Americans are too arrogant. See, arrogance. Yeah, I think I said that. Arrogance. There's arrogant Americans. Bend, bow, you know, like the reed. Buddha says. Then the wind comes at you and you're flexible. Put your head below your heart once in a while. Sri Krishna calls one of the greatest physical austerities doing puja. They're always bending, genuflecting, and flowers and candles. And you see, that's not weakness. That's humility being generated, and patience is coming. And fortitude is coming from that, and certitude is coming from that. You're going to be sure and certain of your deliberations. Well, in almost every philosophy in India, this one comes up as almost the final. You might call it the final death gasp of ignorance, called getting over the gunas. Triguna-titatvam is dissolution of the gunas finally. The gunas keep the jivatman in the body from joining the paramatman in the soul. So these will be the last vestiges of body consciousness. You might have even let go of the body, but there's still prana, and there's still mind, and there's still thought. And these have all come out of the gunas when they broke into disequilibrium at the beginning of a cosmic cycle. So you're going all the way back to the very beginning of a cycle of time when you are able to dissolve the gunas back to their source. And why not? Because all of those are also in you. The original divinity was in you. The root ignorance was in you, see, in the mind. And therefore you have to take care of them both by accentuating one and eliminating the other. As you can do that even in life, in these ways the rishis are describing it. Brahmanishta, very important, immersion in Brahman. And I like this attitude best of all. When I think I am Brahmi, then I alone exist. It is so when I think so. So that's a very high stage of knowledge, when you can declare that this is, or that is, or I am. See how Saham it is? And then it's so because you have made it so. So what does that mean? I spent so much time not making it so. I spent so much time not being myself. I spent so much time resisting the truth of my own being. and so much time running away from it. And whenever it came to me, I spent so much time pushing it away. And all I need to do is welcome it into my being. That's who I am. I am that. I am Atma Brahma. The self is that Brahman. So whatever you had to do away with, fundamentalist upbringing and religion, all the mic activities of social conventions and various things, you went through so much. So now why don't you just come and reach the goal of human existence and accede, and agree. Let your mind agree with that great truth of Atma Gyan, with this great condition. So you can see how Vedanta puts it here with a little quip out of every one of Swamiji's teachings. So we like to, because he's so great in that department, then we like to sing about him so that we're aware of just what happened to us when he visited the earth. Ushakale padam namaskricha shisha labiranjanyatam iti shrata lavaya sameta samukhe dadeta darshanam viveka anandate prabhate pranjali narendra shashave narendra yovane narendra kridane narendra kridane narendra palane narendra garpane viveka anandate prabhate pranjali vimoksham swatmanas chaturyogadvabhi pritagva samate hitam lokasyacha tavagya sadayediti prichanaraha viveka nandate prabhate pranjali narendra shashave narendra yovane narendra kridane narendra shikshane narendra palane narendra yarpane viveka anandate prabhate pranjali viveka anandate prabhate pranjali viveka anandate prabhate pranjali. Which translates, grant thy blessings on all beings, Vivekananda, and bestow upon us unbroken communion with the Supreme Being. The devoted and faithful devotees are gathering at thy feet to receive your incomparable benediction. They are infinitely blessed to bow before thee and attain liberating darshan. In this auspicious dawn of illumination, O Vivekananda, we offer you our everlasting salutations. O Vivekananda, your message, transmitted from the platform of non-duality, is for the realization of the soul and the highest good of the world. By reinstating and reinterpreting and coalescing all four yogas and making them accessible and understandable to humanity, you have destroyed the foundations of ignorance in this age and ushered in a new era. In this auspicious dawn of illumination, Vivekananda, we offer you our complete salutations. So, just two verses out of this beautiful hymn to Vivekananda, written by the Swami of the Ramakrishna order, who's still living. Shows how much they think and how highly they think of this great soul. So, to finish up this chart quickly, we can go to Sri Krishna's assessment that he gives to Arjuna in the Gita about those fitted for the Brahman state. So, have you, can you say Kaham? Have you done your Kaham today? Have you reached Saham? And can say with all celerity and auspiciousness that I am Atma Brahman. The self is Brahman. It's never been anything other than Brahman. It will never be anything other than Brahman. With that kind of courage of your convictions, then you can step into the light of Brahman. So, and here's where it leaves off from Triguna Titotvam. You can see immediately Krishna's talking about the Gita's easy forbearance of gunic influence. They who do not resist light, activity, and delusion when they appear, nor long after them when they are absent, are fit for Brahman state. Very beautiful. So again, as we were talking about in the hymn I sang earlier, that it's not really a matter of forcing austerity or a matter of squelching emotions, or pretending devotion or any of that. It's a very natural way, this pratipaksha bhavanam. I said that was underrated and said, oh, that's a beautiful teaching, water the flowers, not the weeds. But when you actually get down to doing it, then this is the life of it. You easily forbear things. Forbearance is the default zone of the wise. We often have heard that nice statement. He also says, steady abidance in Brahmagyan. So this is coming from the Lord of Love, Sri Krishna, how much he really accents this level of Brahmagyan, as well as Prema Bhakti, the ecstatic love. But the Brahmagyan, the highest non-dual wisdom, he says about that, constant in the meditation of inaction, in full knowledge that all activity takes place in Prakriti, not in the soul, that one is fitted for the Brahman state and remains impervious to change. Nectar-like, these slokas that come out of these scriptures, from Jivan Mukta Viveka to Yoga Vashishta to Bhagavad Gita to the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, just nectar-like. Perfect transcendence of all dualities. Quote, balanced in pleasure and pain, viewing a stone and gold alike, unaffected by agreeable and disagreeable occurrences, imperturbable amidst censure and praise, stoic in the face of honor and dishonor, of even temperament in association with friend and foe, fully divested of all selfish intentions in all undertakings, and throughout it all, ever abiding in the self firmly, such as these are fit for the Brahman state. Can you fulfill that great statement? You can see how then it's not something to talk glibly about, this enlightenment or moksha, like, oh yeah, I've had it. And I actually have run into people in the West, walked in, had a meeting with me and said, well, I've had Nirvikalpa Samadhi already, I want to tell you that, Babaji. Oh, indeed. Oh, indeed. Here, you come sit in my chair, I'll sit in yours. Yeah. I put it in my brochure, this person said to me. So, I mean, you put it along with all your other business things that you're doing there, you put, as it also has had nirvikalpa samadhi, so that you can, attract people to that. So this is how silly it gets, and how glibly, as I said, how easy it's held that maybe I can attain to this highest state in a thrice, with a snap of a finger, with the waving of a crystal in front of one of my chakras, with a bopping of a peacock feather on my head, with somebody touching my third eye with some ointments, or whatever it is they're doing out there in the silliness of what we used to call the New Age, as if that can just be given so easily. You can see the seers disagree, and you can also see how they tell you how they attain to this highest state that is then doubtless. And anything else that tries to measure up to it is untenable and unacceptable. You're not fooling anyone. This renunciation, for one thing, has to be in place before that. These pleasures, for another thing, have to be gone. Attachment to pleasures have to be gone. And on to, you can see all of the highlights of each of these, the order that we've taken these today. What has to be absent and what has to be present for that state to be upon you. And then, if that wasn't enough, you saw Vivekananda, you heard about him here in the last century. He was here, and Sri Ramakrishna in the century before that. You actually read about them, about hundreds of people who saw them and who attested to the fact that this light was emanating out of them. Then the complete works were left, the gospel was left, and you can read about them, and then you know what a great goal is to be attained by attaining moksha or mukti or koivaya or nirvikalpa or sampragyata or nirvana or satori in different traditions, fana in Muslim. You go anywhere and there's a word for this highest state, they're not going to compromise it, and they're certainly not going to kowtow to or accede to any claims by arrogant Americans that they've gotten it without gurus, without scriptures, and without some great help along the way. No matter how big your name has become, how popular you've become. So Sri Krishna puts a capper on this by saying, that one attains peace who lives devoid of longing, freed from all desires, without the feeling of I, me, and mine. This is the Brahman state. Attaining it, none are bewildered. Being established in it, even at the hour of death, the soul gets into oneness with Brahman. And it's usually here that I would put up another chart called the six steps of meditation on Brahman at the time of death. Another beautiful teaching by Sri Krishna in his single chapter on meditation in the Gita, where he says how to sit, how to breathe, how to think, how to get your energy focused, how to visualize the Ishtam, how to think the word Om, and then fixing your mind entirely 100% on the goal, reach that state. At the time of death, that is. Good advice for that. Practicing that before the time of death. What is life, after all, if it's not a rehearsal for death? And you can die on your cushion before your body drops. Zen Buddhists sometimes, Roshis ask you that, have you died on your cushion yet? So they want that ego to just go away, fade. And so that light will come from behind it, that the ego is so good at hogging that light and covering it too. Vikshepa, avarana, you see. So then the beauty of that is undeniable. Its truth also obvious. In the Saham atmosphere fully now, we make our way towards this chart that I told you I would show you about Brahman. And I'm using the attainment of those state fitted for Brahman as still embodied. Okay, the whole class has really been given from Jivan Mukta Viveka as how to attain Jivan Mukti. That is, how to attain liberation in the body while you're still living. What happens at the time of totally dissolution, where the body and everything is dropped, and in that absolute non-dual state, that is unspeakable and inevitable for the freedom-loving soul. But nonetheless, most of what we're talking about here is what can be determined by describing Brahman by those who have experienced it in the body, with the mind still intact, although pure and clear, crystal clear, intellect, mind, and thoughts, and control of the prana, and becoming the witness of all phenomena. You know, all of those things are there with a person who's still in the Jivan Mukta state. So we're not really going to the Videha Mukti state here and talking about that so much. So you can see here with these epithets of Brahmans, that's how I approached this. Especially out of the Taittiriya Upanishad. The first quote there is, out of fear of Brahman the wind blows, the sun rises, Indra presides, Indra is the god of all gods. Death bows low, and the cosmic sets of fives carry out their respective functions. That's a mouthful. The individual soul only becomes fearless when it attains firm and peaceful ground in that supreme reality. Even a wise man falls victim to fear if he fails to reflect upon Brahman. So I have another chart called Neglect of Brahman that Shankara writes about in the Vivekachudamani, another scripture to start taking up if you haven't already. Classic Vivekachudamani that he says talks about what happens to a person who neglects to meditate on Brahman. Very beautiful readout, sort of like the road to ruination, sevenfold road to ruination, I like to call it in the Gita, where Krishna talks about souls falling out of yoga. And this is a very good thing to read from Adi Shankaracharya too. So we can see here that there are some epithets that we can assign to that Brahman. It's indescribable, but if you use few words, they become very powerful. The uncaused cause was the first one. So there has to be a cause to everything. We usually look at that as the mind. The great mind causes everything. You might say an ultimate cause or penultimate cause could be Om, but that's coming here underneath the unstruck sound. So we also find out that it's nothing that has a beginning, middle, or end to it. It's striking itself all the time, as it were. And so you put these kinds of three-word triputis together, even in English, and they begin to convey to you how powerful this word Brahman is, and what a transcendent state you must be in order to realize it. The unseen seer is there underneath too. Unseen seer pointing to the third eye, and that in that vase, and the unstruck sound pointing to the sound of Om on that vase. You see, so all of these are epithets for Brahman coming from, you might say, the five senses almost. The body acts, that's cause. The eye see, that's the seer. The hear's ear, that's the sound. So all of these things are taken from their lowest common denominator, that is from the grossest manifestation in the five elements, Panchamahabhutas, and you trace them back to the highest source, and they all disappear into their causes. Action into the uncaused cause, all things you see into the unseen seer, all things you hear into the sound of Om, the unstruck sound. The inactive agent is another one, because action, and it also relates to the unmoved mover. So those are very beautiful to contemplate. I would think the unmoved mover, I think more of Shakti, or a lot about Shakti when I say that she's in everything, causing everything to move, but it thinks it moves. Like in Shakale Tomari Icha Icha Mai Taratumi, beautiful song in Bengali that Ramakrishna loves so much, is that all beings, think that they move, they think that they act, and they think that all action belongs to them. But it only belongs to you, O Mother. You're the unmoved mover. And so she's there behind everything as Brahman Shakti that will decide whether or not it gets into expression or not. There are prana Shaktis and Brahman's adventitious Shaktis are called sometimes, that will decide whether the time for things to move, manifest, express, show themselves, act, and when not to do that. So that's all sleight of an invisible hand that's going on. Shakti power. That's why we meditate upon her and propitiate her. The A creator. Some of these I came up with myself. Some of these are kind of in the tradition. You always hear about the unstruck sound. Unseen seer is a good one. But the A creator, so Brahman cannot be called a creator, it's a create. So that was Vivekananda's clue he gave us about this misfiance that God somehow created the worlds. And if you say, well, the Trinity created them, that could be a sort of a sort of compromise or concession, maybe, that you would make. But when you look right at it and you study Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, Lord Brahma is projecting everything from the great mind. He's not drawing something out of nothing. He's drawing it from unmanifested Prakriti and putting it back into manifested Prakriti with the help of Mahashakti again. So creation becomes a very suspect word that could only be used tongue-in-cheek, say, in our tradition, but not literally. So the whole creation theory then has to be examined from that standpoint of people who are thinking God is a creator. If you said that to Swamiji, you'd say, in my tradition, no, in India, no, God's not a creator. The Trinity, the mind, is a projector, but Brahman stays a create. You don't want to bring that down into the realms of vibration. It's unstruck sound. It's not vibrating. It's unseen seer. You can't see it with these eyes. You can barely see it with this third eye. So it's another good epithet to contemplate. How about the unborn procreator? How about the unattached lover? That God loves everyone and everything equally, they say, but there's no attachment whatsoever in that love. And we saw that exemplified in beings like Ram, Krishna, and Ramakrishna more recently, is that they loved the Atman in all beings. They loved the real in all beings. The unreal, they had compassion for it. People who thought they were that they were suffering from unreal things, because the unreal never exists. The real never ceases to be. We just heard that chanted at the beginning of this class. How about the formless refuge? So there's plenty of refuges out there that have form. You can go to this house, that cabin, this monastery, that ashram. I'm going to take refuge there. But there's only one formless refuge. There's only one ultimate refuge, and that's in formlessness, because only renunciation is fearless, and only formlessness is free of birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, death, lust, anger, envy, pride, jealousy, fear, shame, grief, pride of caste, pride of lineage, egotism, attachment, clinging to life. Only the formless is free of that. Well, then why don't you take recourse to it? Maybe not once and for all, if you want to practice a little bit, if you want to help the world from a selfless position, good, we need more of you. But know for certain that Brahman is formless and remains that way, and that all beings find their source of origin in it, formless refuge. This much we can tell you using the sparsest amount of words we can about that formless reality, but these words are profound. It's up to you to take them in and think about them. It's like triputis, 3-word kind of sayings. There's a few, as we run out of time here, just show you the rest of these. The inanimate animator. So you take these into your manana later, to your contemplation state. Animates everything, but itself is inanimate. It's the transcendent pervader. It pervades everything, but doesn't move. It doesn't have to because it's in everything. Everything is animated by it, and because it pervades everything. You see how it works? The uninvolved participant. So you see that dance troupe there, dancing, singing the names of the Lord, and playing their instruments, and all happy and everything. So that's Brahman through and through that, but it's not participating in any of it. It's not involved. It's the uninvolved participant. By its power, everything else moves. The inanimate animator, like vegetables dancing in a pot. That's that story, which we have a God blog about. It's the heat in it. It's the water that's making them dance. No, it's the heat in the water. No, it's the gas heating up the water under the pot. No, it's the gas flowing from a fuel company under sidewalks and through pipes. You have to look very deep to find out why the carrots are dancing in a pot of water. You can't just look at it and say, "Oh, there." You see, I see it. The immutable transformer. It doesn't change itself, but by its very presence, everything else transforms on all levels. And the indivisible multiplier. So I was stretching it here, looking for these contradictory or contrary words that can somehow communicate the incommunicable, that could somehow describe the indescribable, so that our minds could, like Sri Ramakrishna's would if he heard this, immediately go to that place. Immediately go to that place. And he says right here, speaking of him, at times the snake sits still, at other times it wriggles across the ground, but it is all the same snake. Again, the snake contains poison within it, but it does not die because of that. So he had teachings about ants, turtles, snakes, elephants. You just look anywhere, you can see like everything he saw around was pervaded by this inanimate animator. It was there as a transcendent reality in pervading everything that was there, but itself not able to be pervaded. Like ether is one of the best. Objects fill ether, but it displaces air. Objects, but it can't displace ether. So that's this all-pervasive idea of the one Brahman and everything, by which everything moves, breathes, thinks, comes, goes, is born, leaves, by that one power that's making it all possible. So this is where we have, like I said earlier, Shakti enter into the equation. Because then through her, she will take that Parama Shiva, that great highest wisdom of everything, and somehow turn it into objects, turn it into beings, turn it into worlds. And so this divine sport and play can go on. And so that, I know we have run out of our time. I gave you some time in the Saham atmosphere today by looking at its requisite, which I would say would be renunciation. The crown on Christ's head is all about renunciation of the world. It's also about transcendence of pain. It's also about any of these things that you'd want to look at. These great souls hold these all, And so the greatest of all things there is Sri Ramakrishna's renunciation. He had that in fullest extent. To the fullest extent, he had that, which is why he has been able to do amongst us what he has done in a very short time. So here then, we will end our Naham, Kaham, Saham class series, and hopefully look back on it when it gets released and put out, so that we can remind our minds of the beauty of Brahman and Atman and its indivisible oneness. Beautiful. So here we are at the end, ending with this chant. Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Gandvaititam Gaganasadrisham Tattvama Shadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimlamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tannamavi. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we, through that grace, go beyond darkness and delusion, realize the truth in this very life. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om Hari Om Hari Om Tat Sat.